Hello, my name is Tiago Torres and I'm a professor of dermatology at the University of Porto. And the topic of my presentation is Biosimilars in 10 minutes, what you need to know. Well, biosimilars are currently a reality in the treatment of immune-mediated diseases, including psoriasis, and play a relevant role in many countries, especially in Europe. And while it is true that initially, when the first biosimilars were approved, there were some concerns for us as clinicians to use biosimilars in our patients as first line or to switch from an original biologic to a biosimilar, today with the existing evidence, these concerns are no longer justified. The use of biosimilars has enormous potential to reduce treatment costs, increasing patients' access to highly effective therapies. So it is essential for us clinicians to be confident to use biosimilars for the treatment of psoriasis. So in the next 10 minutes, I'll talk about the main principles underlying biosimilar development and approval, and to present some real-world evidence that supports the safe and effective use of biosimilars. These are my disclosures. Well, one of the problems in the management of psoriasis is undertreatment. There is a high proportion of patients with moderate to severe psoriasis and psoriatic arthritis that are receiving no therapy or only topical therapy. And also many patients that are being treated with conventional systemic therapy but are not controlled and would benefit from biologic therapy. And one of the reasons contributing to this problem is the high cost of biologic therapies. So reducing drug-related costs would improve the access to these highly effective biologic therapies, and biosimilars can bring that. And with the expiration of patents of several biologic agents, the development of biosimilars offer the opportunity to reduce the expense due to lower development costs compared to originator biologics. So what is a biosimilar? Well, there is the EMA and the FDA definition, and personally I prefer the FDA definition. For the FDA, biosimilar is a biologic product that is highly similar to its reference product and has no clinically meaningful differences in terms of safety and efficacy compared to the reference product. And to gain approval, a biosimilar must demonstrate a high degree of structural, functional, and clinical similarities with its originator biologic product that was already approved based on a complete dossier. So the production and approval of biosimilars is highly regulated by the regulatory agencies. And also, it's important to know that many of the companies that produce original biologic are also producing biosimilars. So why there is or has been some concerns about the use of biosimilars? Producing a biosimilar is not as easy as to produce a generic drug from a small molecule. It is possible to produce an identical small molecule, but it's not possible to do it with a biologic. That is why it is a biosimilar. Biologic agents are large, complex, and heterogeneous proteins that are produced by living organisms. And they are difficult to completely characterize analytically, so are more difficult to replicate than the chemical small molecule drugs. And moreover, even within biologic products, the complexity may be quite different between a growth factor and an hormone and a monoclonal antibody. And the biosimilars manufacturers have another problem. They do not have access to the manufacturing process of the reference products. They have to establish their own process through reverse engineering. They know the DNA sequence of the reference product, but they don't know all the other production requirements to produce that biologic. And since the process is different than the one used with the originators, the biosimilar will always differ from the original agent, and there is no doubt about it. However, the most important is to know if these differences are clinically important and significant. In a practical point of view, this is the most important. And although these concerns have existed in the beginning, now, with all the evidence we have, this is no longer justified. To see it in perspective, the thing about these differences, there is and there always has been batch-to-batch variability within the references biologics, because even minor alterations in the production processes and storage conditions can affect biological products' consistency and quality. and sometimes different batches of reference biologics can be found on the market at the same time and are being used interchangeably. So the development program of a biosimilar is quite different from the development program of the reference drug. The development of biosimilars is still rigorous, highly regulated, and still associated with significant costs. But contrary to the original biologics, it's very focused on clinical testing, the development of biosimilars, the main goal is to establish physiochemical and functional similarity rather than clinical testing. There are some concepts that is important to discuss, mainly because they are the most controversial, but also the main drivers of biosimilar cost reduction. And the extrapolation is the first one. What is extrapolation? It's when a clinical indication of a reference drug may be granted to the biosimilar without the requirement for clinical studies to support these indications. This highly reduces or even eliminates the need for duplicative clinical studies, so reducing the development costs. And in fact, there is increasing and stronger evidence from retrospective and prospective cohort studies and national registries for the efficacy and safety regarding extrapolation. The first biosimilars were approved for all indications after biosimilarity studies in rheumatoid arthritis, but currently many of them, and in particular the adalimumab biosimilars, are being primarily studied in psoriasis and then extrapolated to the other indications. And in fact, there is strong evidence showing efficacy and safety in extrapolated indications. The other main driver of cost reduction is the possibility of switching patients that are being treated with the original biologic to the less expensive biosimilar. This would of course represent savings for the health system and an economic encouragement for biosimilar companies to reduce prices. Most of the clinical trials of biosimilars have evaluated not only biosimilarity, but also the effect of a single switch. And also there is increasing evidence from real-world studies that support the efficacy and safety of switching. It's important also to note that the main reason that has been reported in these studies for stopping biosimilar or for back switching is the so-called nocebo effect. Nocebo effect is the apparent emergence or worsening of symptoms as a result of negative perception towards an intervention, which have the potential to adversely affect outcomes. And finally, it's also important to mention that EMA in Europe has delegated to each individual member state to evaluate the switch policy. So, what has been the impact of biosimilars in real life? Well, countries that have uptaken the use of biosimilars have decreased the expense of treatment, both due to lower costs of biosimilars, but also because originator biologics have decreased their price. And the overuse of biologic treatment has increased, suggesting that biosimilars have increased the overall rate of biologic therapy initiation. So in summary, biosimilars have the potential to reduce treatment costs, increasing patients' access and earlier use to highly effective therapies. The production and approval of biosimilars is highly regulated and are expected to have the same efficacy and safety profile as the reference product. Real-world evidence and clinical trial data demonstrates efficacy and safety regarding both extrapolation and switching from reference biologic to biosimilar. The psoriasis treatment paradigm must include biosimilars as effective and safe systemic therapies. And of course, increasing knowledge between patients and physicians is critical to increase confidence in biosimilar use and improving treatment outcomes. And biosimilars will contribute to the sustainability of public health systems, allowing the use of innovative biologic products as a first line in patients with greater complexity and need. and thank you for your attention.